Bonsoir, students. That means good day in French. I'm learning French on Duolingo right now, so it's on the top of my brain, as well as what we're about to talk about today, which is finding equations from graphs. So when I say finding equations, essentially what I mean is we are going to be finding what the standard formula looks like for a particular graph. So before we were given the standard formula and we had to graph it, that's when we found like the points. We picked our own values for X, plugged them in, then we graphed. But now they're giving us the graph. And in this case, I also wrote down the points off on the side, but most of the time they're not going to give you the points. You kind of have to like create that own t-chart of your own. And we're going to fill in the standard formula, finding our slope and our y-intercept, and write what is the standard formula of a line just by giving the graph. Okay. So you'll notice here I have a graph. I also wrote down the points that are highlighted here on the graph. I tried to make this line as straight as possible, but I did not use a ruler. So this is what it is. Okay. So when we fill in the formula, we need two things. We need to know what is our slope, and we need to know what is our y-intercept, because the y and the x, kind of are dependent upon where, the line is. So we leave those in their variable format. We just have to find these two things. Once we find these two things, we can plug them into the standard formula and we will have our official equation for the particular line. Okay. So to find slope, in the previous video, we looked at many different ways that we can find slope. So we can find the slope from this graph by looking at what is the rise over the run. We could pick 2 points either from the table or these are the same points here that are on the graph, and we could calculate the slope using the 2-point method. It's kind of up to you. I'm going to model both because sometimes like graphs are not as easy to read as just picking 2 points and then calculating the slope that way. It's also good practice to know both. So if I want to find the rise over the run, actually the first thing I'm going to note is that this is a positive slope. Okay. This is a positive slope. It is going up towards the right, towards a positive number. So that means M is going to be a positive number. That's just kind of a thing we need to remember to make sure we can like double check our work. Okay. So because this is a positive number, I'm going to look at the rise compared to the run. So I'm just going to pick any 2 points on this line and kind of calculate it. I'm going to pick these 2 points because they're closer together. So if I do that, one thing to note is in this case, my rise is actually going to go up and then over to get from point to point. If this was a negative line, it would have to go down and then over, kind of like what happened in our previous lesson. You can still calculate the rise over the run. Like you could still do like go down and over to figure out how you get from this point to this point. But you need to bear in mind that it's not going to be a negative. It's still going to be a positive number because the whole entire line is a positive slope. So if we look at, we're getting from this point here, this point is 0, -4, and then this point here is 1, 7. So to get from 0 to 7, I have to go up 1, 2, 3, which you can't really tell. I'll try to make it thicker on the y-axis. You have to go up 3 spots. And then to go over from 0 to, this is 1, it looks kind of like a longer distance, but that's because this tick mark here is not as close to the axis as the other ones. This is only 1 block over or 1 tick mark over. So the rise over the run, I'll kind of write it down here beneath. Actually, you know what? No, I'll write it right here. The rise over the run is equal to 3 over 1, which if we simplify that is 3. The slope of this line is 3. If I start at any point and go up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1, I should end up at a point on this particular line. Now, if we did from this point to this point, we should also get the same thing of 3 over 1. Sometimes if the point is like farther away, you're not going to get the same slope, but you should get something that when you simplify it makes the same slope. So we know our slope is equivalent to 3 just by doing rise over run. Let's pick 2 points and calculate it that way. So like if we use the same 2 points that we have 0, 4 and 1, 7. And remember, to calculate the slope using only 2 points, we have to determine what set 1 and set 2 is going to be. So I'm going to choose this as set 1. I'm just going to put S1 and I'm going to choose this one as set 2. The reason why I did this is because, remember, I have to find the differences between these two numbers. And these two numbers, well, 7's bigger than 4, so I'm going to get a positive. Like, I would much rather end up with positive numbers than negative numbers. So it's up to you. I could have done set 1 and set 2, but I know when I do 0 minus 1 and 4 minus 7, I'm going to get negatives, and I don't really want to deal with negatives. So that's why I chose this method, okay? So if I'm going to do set 1 minus set 2, this is how it's going to look. Remember, I need to show you the difference between the y values and the x values. So one way that we can write that is the change in y over the change in x. This little triangle sign is the delta Greek sign that means change. So if I find the difference or the change in the x and y values, set 1 minus set 2. So set 1 is 7 and set 2 is 4. So the y values are going to be 7 minus 4. The x values, I have to do set 1 minus set 2 again. So 1 minus 0. So this ends up being 3 over 1, which, like before, is equal to 3. So we found the slope of 3 using these two different methods. We end up with the same answer. If I did set, I didn't realize I didn't write set 2 there. If I did set 2 minus set 1, or if I said this is set 1 and this is set 2, I would end up with negative 3 over negative 1, which still simplifies to positive 3, right? A negative divided by a negative is a positive. If I subtracted this and I only got one negative symbol, then that would mean this is a negative slope, but we know it's not supposed to be a negative slope because it's a positive line. But if this was a negative line or a negative slope line, that would be how another way that we could get our negative slope value. Okay, so we have our value for m, and that is going to be 3. So again, we're trying to plug into the standard formula, y equals mx plus or minus b. So we know our slope is positive 3. And b, to determine if it's going to be plus or minus and what the value is, we have to go look at where our line crosses the y-intercept. So the y-intercept, or the line, crosses the y-axis at 4. At positive 4. So this is our y-intercept. I'm just going to kind of draw an arrow and put, this is B. This is B, okay? Because this is where it crosses, where the line crosses the y-axis, okay? So our intercept is a positive 4. So that means the formula is going to look like this. Y equals 3x plus 4. And if this line crossed the y-axis somewhere down here in the negatives, we would have a minus in some number, okay? So this particular equation, y equals 3x plus 4, is the formula that represents the line that was modeled here. The slope is 3 and it crosses at the y-intercept of 4. Sometimes on the 7th grade STAR test, they give you a situation like this. So you really just have to determine these two things. What's the slope and what's the y-intercept? A lot of times if it's multiple choice, you can look at what the y-intercept is and what are the answer choices they give you. And you might be able to eliminate like at least 2, maybe like at least 1 of the like answer choices. Like if they have like a -4 as like an option in like a couple of the answers, you could automatically eliminate those answer choices because your y-intercept's positive 4. So that's just something I want you to be aware of because it might show up. So this is how we find the standard formula of a line using a graph. And again, if they don't give you a table like this, I would suggest labeling the points on the line. If they don't even give you points on the line, then you definitely need to pick 2 points that are there. I would try to pick points that are pretty easy to calculate with. So anything that's like crossing the axis, you know, is going to be like 0 and that number. I would try to pick something that's close to the origin because it's smaller numbers. I would just try to pick points that are very easy like to work with. If they don't give you any points whatsoever, you can just choose your own points and make your own little T-chart so that way you have it. Okay. So you have one practice question. I want you to figure out what is the formula or what is the equation that represents this particular graph. So I did actually give you the points on here. So this is 3, 2, and this is -3, -2. It crosses there through the origin. So find the equation from the following graph. And bear in mind, we did not talk about it on the other example. If a line crosses through the origin here, that's going to mean that your y-intercept is 0. So you don't have to leave like the plus or minus 0 as part of your equation. Okay. So when you do this, just check how the answer is formatted in the table of contents so you can kind of see the difference. I don't want to like give you the answer here, but I'm just trying to help you out for this particular practice problem. If you have any questions, I would suggest potentially watching this video twice so you understand. Double check with your table mates or your teacher and check your answer for this in the table of contents. The y-intercept's always pretty easy to find. It's typically the slope that people have the most trouble with. So I would either use finding the slope from 2 points or calculate the rise over run, maybe determine what kind of slope this is. Is this a positive line, a negative line, 0 or undefined, and then kind of go from there. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.